Chapter 13. Run like hell. A swelling of energy gathered in Sam's quads and calves. The need to explode into a flat-out sprint was clear. His life depended on it. He needed to vanish. One would naturally assume that since he practiced parkour that he would be able to run like the wind. But parkour was an art of explosive power and not true speed and distance. Yesterday, Sam would have been winded after 50 yards of a full sprint. Today, however, was not yesterday. Many things Sam had done today were miraculously different from yesterday. He was ready to see what his legs had in store for him today. Within the first few steps, he could tell the difference. There was not going to be any disappointments in his legs today. His strides were long and powerful. He was covering large swaths of ground with every step. The interchange of energy spent and force returned was phenomenal. It was faster than he had ever moved before, and he wasn't even at full speed yet. The bullet wound to his leg was barely even noticeable at this point. He didn't know if it had healed his self or it was because of the adrenaline and endorphins. Tearing down the center of the crowded city street, he was covering the length of a city block in less time than it took to breathe in a lungful of air. The sound of the wind whipping past his ears was deafening. There was a point when the power of this kind of sprint leaves the body, and the muscles and lungs can no longer keep up. That point showed absolutely no signs of being anywhere close. He was running a flat-out full sprint, and his body was repairing fatigued muscles on the fly. Sam had a bit of giddiness building in the back of his mind. The experience of this kind of speed had to be one of the coolest things that had happened to him today. Right next to the whole jumping across a city street while avoiding snipers thing. However, the excitement would have to wait. The rhythmic thump of helicopter blades at low levels was not far behind him. As long as they could see him, they could track him. If he were going to escape, he would need cover away from the helicopters. He needed to be in a place that was familiar, a place that he knew every nook and cranny, and that place was his neighborhood, Hipsterville. If he were there, he could find lots of cover. He knew every square inch of that place from all the countless days of training. There was not a single nook and cranny that he couldn't find. If he were there, no one could find him. He would have a chance to think, a chance to breathe, a chance to figure things out. The problem with Hipsterville is it was back the other way, across the bridge, and that was the only bridge to cut across the river 4 miles. That meant going back to the mess that he was just running away from. He put on the brakes and stopped running. The rush of air that he had created in his mad dash through the city streets caught up with him and blew past him. There was no sense in running any further in the opposite direction. Home was the right decision, and he knew it. But going home would only offer a reprieve. There was no real escape from these soldiers. He couldn't help but think that these guys knew who he was. He came down into the tower that Michael dropped him on, and they were there, waiting. Were they tracking him since last night? Surely not. If that were the case, they would have nabbed him in his sleep. There were pieces of this puzzle that didn't fit. Nevertheless, he would have to go somewhere other than his house. Someplace safe. Someplace like Julia's apartment. The journey there would be a tough one, though. This is about to be the dumbest move I have ever made, Sam said in a peculiar sign of reassurance to himself. It was 3 miles away to the very edge of his neighborhood. Then another 10 blocks of left and right turns through the poorly laid out city streets. Lucky for him, he knew the way through the back alleys. The thumping of the helicopter was drawing to a stop directly overhead now. The whipping blades drove the air down onto the ground and kicked up dust. Pulling his forearm in front of his face as a feeble attempt to guard himself against the blowing dirt and dust, he looked up at the mechanical monstrosity. The side door started to slide open. Sam knew what was next. He needed to start running, or he would be shot. Any second, the man was going to pop out of that door and put any number of bullets in him. There were hundreds of action films stashed away in his memory banks to remind him this was not safe. Well, shit. Here we go, Sam said as he took off like a bat out of hell. Pushing himself to a full sprint as fast as possible, he knew it would only take a few seconds before running into dozens of heavily armed men that were trying to kill him just moments earlier. Maybe he would get lucky enough to blow right past them, though the likelihood of that was slim considering there was a helicopter chasing him. He also knew that no matter how fast he ran, he couldn't outrun a radio, but that didn't mean he wasn't about to try. As the block zipped past, the wind got quieter. He could feel his senses starting to dial themselves in. He was able to pattern his breathing and calm the adrenaline rush that had possessed him thus far. He could see the men on the horizon with clear accuracy, even though they were just outside of the normal person's range of vision. He could count them. Moreover, he could sense them. He could smell them. He didn't smell them with his nose, per se. It was as if he could smell their intent. Some had the intent to kill, driven by fear. Others had the intent to stay alive, driven by fear. One amongst them, though, felt different. It was as if he had felt it before. There was a strange feeling of connection. It was the feeling he got from the soldier in the cave that Malice spared. Something told him they were the one and the same. The closer he got, the stronger these feelings got. He could sense the fingers quivering on triggers. He could feel the anxiousness coming from the mass of men and metal. Was this what all men felt in war? How nerve-wracking it must be to be a soldier. Sam did not envy them. He knew that a head-on approach would get him killed. He needed to detour and get a head start on them before they were able to chase him. He had the advantage if he played it right. His knowledge of the city was vast, and he was very fast at the moment. That large amount of people in vehicles would take a moment to mobilize again. The helicopter above him was going to be a problem, though. Everywhere he went, that damn thing was going to follow him. What to do? He did not want to hurt anybody, but he was going to need a huge distraction in order to get out of this. He needed to slow down for a minute and analyze the situation. What could he use to his advantage? Sam stopped suddenly. His eyes raced back and forth, looking at everything around him. The cars, the street signs, the lights, everything. He looked to his right and saw a car parked there. He looked at the men that were about 60 yards away. They had conveniently gathered next to a fire hydrant under a stoplight. He felt the wind from the helicopter's blades pushing above him. He instantly had a plan. Whether it would work or not remained to be seen. Taking in a deep breath and then darting to the car on his right, he smashed his hand to the glass of the rear driver's side door, crushing the metal and cheap plastic with his grip. In one seamless move, Sam ripped the door from the car with all of his might and flung it like a frisbee down the street. The door smashed into the fire hydrant with remarkable force, causing it to rupture and sending a massive stream of water spewing into the crowd of soldiers. It was just enough of a disruption to give him a way through. Ripping the front door off, he flung it down range as well and struck the light post at the base, causing it to crumble and fall into the men. Without missing a single step, Sam whipped around to the front of the car, stripped the car of its hood, revealing the engine. With a quick spin, he threw the lightweight piece of formed sheet metal upwards towards the helicopter. It reached incredible speeds as it traveled in a direct line towards its target. The pilot was able to avoid taking a direct hit, but the hood smashed into the propellers with a sound that caused Sam to cringe. The helicopter began to spin out of control instantly. Sam's eyes popped wide open. It was almost certainly an oh shit moment. The helicopter smashed into the building next to it and promptly fell to the ground, sending shards of glass, metal, and asphalt flying in all directions. For a man that did not want to hurt anyone, he had just failed miserably. Now he was committed to his plan. Though injury and death were not part of it, Sam had caused both. But at that moment, he could not let either of those things distract him. Mourn later, run now. Stepping backward with a few skips, he picked up pace again and began to sprint full speed in between the buildings, using alleyways and zigzagging in between city blocks. A few tears streamed from his face as the responsibility of hurting those people got him. The thought of all those people he had wounded or killed weighed in his stomach like a lead brick. The feeling of helplessness and not being in control was reminiscent of the days when he was a dog under the thumb of his parents. He didn't have control then, and he sure as hell didn't have control now. He hated not knowing what to do. After blasting through a couple of miles of city streets, Sam was only a few blocks from his neighborhood. The only thing left was to make it across the bridge. Just a short distance and he could vanish into some little hole in the wall. Salvation was so close, and yet there was still no way out of this mess. The confidence that this massive increase in ability and power brought was also coupled with a tremendous amount of remorse and sorrow. With one negative thought, he launched his self-doubt into a full-scale assault on his psyche. Today was turning out to be the worst kind of a nightmare, one in which he was so lucid and yet so helpless to the environment. I I want to wake up, he mumbled in a voice broken by the sorrow of the day. But how could he wake up from a dream that was a reality? The day was quickly becoming more than he could handle again. His mood was vastly out of control along with his power. Sam was turning into a superior being, or so he was told, but he could not control his emotions. They swayed like leaves in the wind, first filling him with power and confidence, and then self-loathing and regret. He hated this. Just like clockwork, when doubt entered his mind, so did the voice in his head.
Look at you running like a little bitch,
Malice said.
You don't deserve this power.
Shut up! Sam screamed as he came to a dead stop. The wind created in his race across the city flew past him once again, rustling his hairs and clothes.
I'm not going anywhere, Sam. The stronger you get, the stronger I get. The weaker you become, the sooner I'm going to put you in that box and show you what you are really capable of,
growled Malice's voice. Sam clutched the side of his head and screamed so loud it rattled the windows in the surrounding buildings and vibrated doors on their hinges. Falling to his knees, he punched the asphalt, cracking it like a flimsy dinner plate.
You're weak, boy. So pathetic.
Sam could hear Malice as if he were standing right next to him, shouting in his ear. He tried to tune the monster out, but there was no salvation for this troubled young man. What could he do? He had nowhere to go, no one that knew what was going on with him. He had no one to help him. I am all alone, he thought to himself. This sobering thought bled from his heart with passion and intent. It echoed in his mind so loudly that it drowned Malice out, if only for a moment. Sam, however, was not alone. His statement of despair was powerful enough to act as a beckoning call. He felt a massive rush of air blasting at him from the front. Without looking, he assumed another helicopter was hovering above him. Sam slowly lifted up his head to see a light that surely must have been from heaven. And there was Michael in all of his glory, hovering above him with wings of energy, not feathers, beating massive, powerful strokes. Michael was bathed in a warm, penetrating light, the likes of which Sam had never seen. Even Michael's skin was drenched in this magnificent display of illuminance. He spoke with a voice like thunder. You are never alone, Sam Rittenhouse. I will be with you until the day you die for the very last time. But this thing that you carry with you, it must be silent. Michael placed his palm on Sam's forehead and began to murmur in words that Sam could not understand. Malice started to shriek and scream in resistance and agony. Michael's face grew stern as a scowl stretched itself across his now pitch-black eyes. In a tone that matched that of Malice's, he said, I command you to go back into the darkness. Malice, I refuse to hear thy voice. Twister of words, be silent, or I will smite thee. Sam's face grimaced with pain. Whatever was going on inside of him was not pleasant, and it seemed to resist with all of its might. Sam simply could not believe that Michael was truly talking to Malice. He was nothing more than the boogeyman in Sam's dreams. Could this be the voice that was tormenting him? A deep growl came from inside of Sam that did not resonate from his vocal cords. It erupted from a place inside where his gut was supposed to be, but he could only feel a hole in that place. Then, the growl was gone. I can see your wings, Michael. The words barely tumbled from his lips. The exhaustion of the day was catching up with him. There are a lot of things you can see now, Sam. I will tell you all of them, but we have to leave here now. These poorly dressed men and their silly little guns are coming, and I can't have you dying again just yet. Michael scooped Sam up, offering support to the young man who had gone through so much today. Sam looked at Michael and said, This sucks. You don't know the half of it. Let's get a drink before it gets worse. Michael thrust his wings with a single beat. They were gone.